All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to completely decode the exact psychological mechanisms that compliance professionals, salespeople, fundraisers, marketers, use to get us to automatically say yes. Look, we live in an incredibly complex world, and our brains have had to develop these little shortcuts just to survive it. But what actually happens when those shortcuts get hijacked?
So here is our survival guide playbook for today. We'll start off with the click-whir phenomenon, move right through the traps of reciprocation and consistency, explore social proof and liking, unpack authority and scarcity, and then finally we'll look at how to fight back.
We are pulling these absolutely incredible insights directly from the groundbreaking work of Dr. Robert Cialdini. And what's truly fascinating here is that Cialdini didn't just, study this in a sterile lab. No, he actually embarked on a 3-year undercover immersion into the world of compliance professionals. He literally answered ads for sales trainees, infiltrated fundraising agencies, and learned from the inside exactly how the pros get us to comply.
Okay, Section 1, the click-whir phenomenon, our vulnerable automatic pilot. To really understand our vulnerability here, we first have to look at this very specific quirk in our own mental hardwiring.
Think of a mother turkey for a second. She's fiercely protective, right? She'll lovingly care for her chicks, but her maternal instinct is triggered almost entirely by one highly specific thing, the cheep cheet sound the baby chicks make. In this one wild experiment, researchers took a stuffed polecat, which is a turkey's natural enemy, and pulled it toward a mother turkey. Naturally, she attacked it furiously. But when they put a small recorder inside that stuffed polecat playing that exact cheep cheep sound, she actually gathered her mortal enemy right underneath her. It's literally click, the appropriate tape is activated, whir, and out rolls the standard sequence of behaviors. And the crucial point for us today is that humans, we have these pre-programmed tapes too.
Now, we aren't foolish for using these automatic shortcuts. Actually, as Alfred North Whitehead noted, civilization advances by extending the number of operations we can perform without thinking about them. In our rapidly moving, hyper-intricate modern world, we simply don't have the time, the energy, or the mental capacity to analyze every single detail of every situation. We absolutely have to rely on these rules of thumb just to save vital mental energy.
But here is where the danger lies. Exploiters use a kind of psychological jujitsu. They use our own momentum and our own shortcuts against us. Take this Arizona jewelry store owner, for example. She couldn't sell this allotment of turquoise jewelry to save her life. In total frustration, she leaves a note for her employee to price everything at 1/2. Well, the employee misread it and actually doubled the price. And guess what? Suddenly, all the jewelry sold out. The tourists, who were completely unsure of how to judge turquoise quality, just relied on their standard shortcut: expensive equals good. That inflated price suddenly became a trigger feature for quality. Click-whir.
Moving on to Section 2, reciprocation and consistency, the traps of obligation. These are our first two weapons of influence, and they heavily leverage our deeply conditioned feelings of fairness and stability.
So the rule of reciprocity basically says we should try to repay what another person has provided us. Honestly, it's the glue of human society. But look at how easily it gets exploited. The Hare Krishna Society vastly increased their donations simply by pressing a flower into a target's hand right before asking for money. Even if the person didn't want the flower, the social obligation to receive it robbed them of their ability to choose their own debts. Similarly, the Amway Corporation would leave what they called a BUG, a free sample tray of products, in a customer's home for a few days. That natural, almost unbearable urge to reciprocate that uninvited gift, it leads to massive sales.
Let's see how this builds into an even more sophisticated trap, the rejection then retreat technique. This perfectly illustrates how a manipulator can make a calculated concession, which then forces you to automatically offer a concession of your own. Say I want you to lend me $5. First, I ask for 10. You refuse. Then I retreat to $5. Not only does the contrast principle make $5 suddenly look really small, but my retreat looks like I'm doing you a favor, a concession. So you feel socially obligated to reciprocate by agreeing. It's essentially heads I win, tails you lose.
Our next weapon is commitment and consistency. Once you take a stand or go on record with something, your internal consistency tape starts whirring. We inherently view inconsistency as a super negative trait, like you're indecisive or confused. So if a compliance professional can just get you to make a tiny, small initial commitment, they've set the stage for your automatic, often ill-considered consistency with that earlier choice.
And commitments are most powerful when they are active, public, require effort, and are viewed as an inner choice.
Exploiters know for a fact that if they can get you to, say, write down a goal or make a public declaration without some obvious outside reward, you will actually start generating your own new reasons to justify remaining relentlessly consistent with it. You'll literally convince yourself it was your idea all along.
Section 3. Social Proof and Liking, the Pull of the Crowd. Let's see how incredibly easily our behavior is hijacked simply by looking at the people around us.
The principle of social proof dictates that we figure out what's correct by finding out what other people think is correct. When we're uncertain, we instantly look to similar others. But this makes us wildly easy prey for anyone willing to manufacture fake social evidence. I mean, television executives dub in canned laugh tracks because they just know the sound of laughter triggers our own, totally regardless of whether the joke is actually funny. Bartenders salt their tip jars at the start of a shift for the exact same reason, to create the immediate illusion that tipping is just the standard behavior here.
Then there is the weapon of liking. Obviously, we prefer to say yes to requests from someone we know and like, but total strangers can artificially build that bond in minutes using things like physical attractiveness, similarity, compliments, familiarity, and association. They dress like us to leverage similarity. They shower us with compliments because, let's face it, we are absolute suckers for flattery, and they associate themselves with positive things. Joe Girard, widely recognized as the world's greatest car salesman, attributed his immense success to offering just two things: a fair price and being someone they actually like to buy from.
The classic Tupperware party is a masterful example of how this all comes together. It is this quintessential American compliance setting that weaves multiple weapons of influence into one incredibly profitable net. Think about it. There are games and prizes to trigger reciprocity. Guests publicly describe their favorite products. Boom, commitment. Everyone around you is buying, providing massive social proof. And most importantly, the request to buy doesn't come from some random stranger. It comes from the host, a friend that you like.
Section 4. Authority and Scarcity, Deferring to Power and Rarity. Let's examine our automatic, almost knee-jerk deference to those in charge, and of course, our total panic over missing out.
We are trained from birth that obedience to proper authority is right, which brings us to the very famous, very unsettling Milgram experiment. Subjects were instructed by a lab-coated researcher to deliver increasingly painful electric shocks to a victim. Despite the victim's screams, and honestly, despite their own intense agonizing over it, the subjects just continued. Why? Because the researcher was a perceived authority figure. We frequently shift into this automatic deference even when the commands make absolutely zero sense.
And the most terrifying part, we don't even need real authority to trigger this response. The mere symbols of it will do the trick. Titles, clothes, luxury trappings, these can all be counterfeited with the flimsiest of materials. In one study, experienced nurses received a phone call from a fake doctor directing them to administer an obviously unsafe dose of an unauthorized drug to a patient. Simply because the caller claimed the title of doctor, the nurses essentially unhooked their professional intelligence and moved to comply, right up until researchers stepped in and stopped them.
Just take a look at how this plays out in everyday traffic. Researchers observed what happened when a car failed to move at a green light. When it was an economy car, drivers behind it honked immediately. Some even rammed its bumper. But when the stopped car was a luxury, prestige model, projecting that aura of authority, 50% of the motorists waited respectfully. They never even touched their horns. We deeply, deeply underestimate how strongly authority status unexpectedly paralyzes our normal, everyday reactions.
Our final weapon is scarcity, the rule of the few. We are naturally far more motivated by the thought of losing something than by the thought of gaining something of equal value. Exploiters eagerly hijack this loss aversion. They use tactics like limited-time-only sales or last-one-in-stock claims to create a panicked click-word buying response. It strips away all our critical thinking and just replaces it with a desperate fear of missing out. Together, these 6 principles form a nearly inescapable web.
Section 5. How to fight back. Disconnecting the autopilot. So, with exploiters mimicking triggers literally all around us, how do we actually defend ourselves without completely exhausting our brains?
Well, your first line of defense is actually listening to your body. When someone is using the consistency trap on you, you will literally feel a tightening in your stomach when you realize you're being cornered by your own previous words. As Emerson notes, not all consistency is good. When you feel that pit in your stomach, it's a massive red flag. It's time to realize you're dealing with a foolish consistency designed solely to corner you into compliance.
So here is your ultimate defense playbook. You do not have to reject every single favor, nor should you ignore all social proof. The key is just to recognize the fake trigger.
If you realize the social proof is just canned laughter, or you suddenly find yourself liking a car salesman way more than you should after just 20 minutes, temporarily disconnect your automatic pilot. If someone gave you a gift just to force a purchase, mentally redefine it as a compliance trick, not a favor. Once you define it as a trick, you are instantly and completely free from the social obligation to reciprocate. Because the complexity of our civilization is only going to continue to accelerate, arming yourself with the knowledge of these triggers is the absolute only way to protect your mind from being hacked. So, I want to leave you with this thought to reflect on today. Look closely at the interactions in your life, your purchases, the favors you grant. Which weapon of influence are you most vulnerable to today? Because once you know, you can finally take your brain off autopilot.